Have you ever been told to be constantly positive, to only focus on the bright side of things and to, well, technically disregard everything that is negative? Well, the things that I've, mentioned right now are signs of someone who can actually be quite sick. Because only sick people would want you to be fully positive. As of the introspection I've gone through, people would want you to be positive because mainly they either cannot, can no longer, or they simply don't want to, or no longer want to be so called positive. Let's not forget that it is easier to simply fall into the negative sphere and focus on the negative sides because everything seems to be feeding that state. The mass media, your parents, so many people around us are fussing about the stuff that they don't have, but they simply can't take or don't want to take into account that which they have. Because if people don't count their blessings, they will have all the time to simply count all their lacks. And in this world, lacks aren't necessarily a bad thing. If one takes into account physicality, everything that we own is in a certain way a kind of bondage. Because when you own certain things, and we are all kind of guilty of buying more things than we'd ever need, right? So when we have so many things, we kind of force ourselves to use those, even if we kind of feel that we wouldn't need those, but we still force ourselves to use those. And this is obviously not necessarily the best thing. Because ultimately, when one buys more than they need, they will kind of end up forcing themselves to use those things, even if they don't necessarily need those, and they will play all sorts of tricks in their minds, all sorts of ideas, or they'll try to be positive about that. Maybe tomorrow, maybe tomorrow. But there is a quote that says if in a certain year you haven't used something, most likely you won't use it the next year either. This may obviously depend. But one concept that I have noticed throughout my introspection is that there is a thing called positivity, but there is also something called toxic positivity. Just as I wanted to pinpoint that negativity can also have a certain sense of constructive negativity, because if everything would be feng shui more or less, or plus and minus, black and white, or technically feng shui, as I think it's pronounced correctly in Chinese, the point is, what is it the idea of, constructive negativism? Well, now it all depends on subjectivity, because subjectivity is the most important matter. I've been telling people all around me that it never matters how reality truly is when you want to take into account or discuss with certain people. You have to take into account their reality because you have to make yourself understood by those people specifically if you truly want that. So if certain people have certain beliefs, you have to understand that the belief is the most powerful thing. It is indeed a self-parasitic thing. You allow it to take control over you because that's how the intellect works. Whatever one believes, they will most likely fanatically follow. Because belief means accepting something without a necessity for proof. But when you accept something, it's already part of you. That is why you cannot like something or dislike something without creating a certain bias. Because you have to accept something into your awareness so that you can either like it or dislike it. Which is more or less natural, because liking or disliking something is basically the initial, the main impulse of the physical body. You come into account, you come into contact with something. You either like it or you don't like it. That's the main impulse. Sure, you can be wiser and use your intuition, use your mind also to sort through things, through to conduct judgment, and then you can end up with a more neutral perspective. That is why constructive negativism is what I call, it's another, let's call it a personal term for neutrality, because many people call me a negativist. And I remind people that society as it is sick. So a lot of things will sound unpleasant to people, so they will be catalogued as negative. But if you are realistic, let people call you negative as much as they want. Uh, After all, the point is, being a realistic being means being more or less rooted in reality as it is, good or bad. Because there is always good and there is always bad, right? There are complacent people and there are people who are fighting for their rights, and this is how history has always been. We don't have to focus on this present moment only, even if the present is kind of important. But the point about this is, when it comes to toxic positivity, there is a big problem in society because most people want you to be positive. But being positive all the time means being complacent. Because negative people need so called positive people because they wouldn't have anyone to vampirize on. All that narcissistic people or people with narcissistic approaches want is someone to simply give them all the attention. So technically, you are going to be positive. But the point is, those people might want you to be destructive. Yes, even if you are destructive, you're still positive to them because you're doing what they want. So doing what they want is a sense of being positive even if you're being destructive at the same time, because some people's misery can be some other people's comfort, right? And some people's comfort will obviously be other people's misery. So both of these things go together. Now, many people might tell you that being negative won't help you. Well, actually, being negative may actually help you more than you think. Why? Well, because being negative means being in touch with your emotions. There will be people in your life who will remind you of certain things you don't like. There will be people who will piss you off because they want so, because they abuse power, or because you're inviting them in your life to do so. So when you feel negative, it is technically an alarm from your body telling you that something is not right. Being positive and negative and balancing yourself in between the two is one way to become more sensitive towards life, because the energies of life, your psychological energies, your emotional energies, are all impacted constantly and bombarded by what other people think, by the energies that are settled within each place that you go to, right? There are people there who have been there in the closer past or in the distant past, and based on certain things that happen, many things, many emotions can still linger there, many thought forms can still linger over there, even hundreds of times in even hundreds of years into the future. So when it comes to being negative, it goes to show that if you disallow negativity, you are disallowing the idea of being in tune with how you feel. Because the cycles of life, the astral energies, the whole universe will have a certain influence on you. Not because the universe wants. But if the whole galaxy spins around a supermassive black hole, and that supermassive black hole has at least a certain impact or influence on keeping the galaxy tight together, right? Because it doesn't seem to allow things to spin out of the galaxy, but it is not necessarily attracting things towards it. So there is always this perfect balance. So if that supermassive black hole has such an influence on us, imagine that nebulas, which are much closer, will obviously have their own influence, right? Stars also have their own influence, much smaller than our own, cosmic sun. But the point is, ultimately, our star also has a certain influence on us, emotionally, mentally, right? The moon also has, and, well, the yogic systems and principles seem to also have been built around that. The sun is masculine and the moon is feminine. But not only the yogis, right, of India and the Eastern cultures would speak about that. Even pagan societies would also believe in such things. So there was a certain level of balance back in the times when people didn't have distractions. Because being distracted constantly is also a sign in a way of being positive. Because positivity, constant positivity, means being complacent. You're always acting as someone else wants, so you're positive to their subjectivity. Good vibes only are kind of bad because you're dismissing half of who you are. There are impulses in your body. The main impulse of the mind, as one that most people are running away from, is that whatever you don't like must be destroyed. Obviously, this will be denied by a lot of people, especially since it might make them look bad, but it actually makes you look human, because all animals have the same impulses as well. Impulses are the same for all life, at least on this planet, because different impulses may be driven on other worlds. But speaking about this planet, all animals have the same impulses, right? When someone is breaking into your intimate zone, right? They're entering your circle of intimacy. The point is, you'll warn them, right? That is the first impulse. You'll warn them verbally, physically, or whatever. But if someone enters your circle of intimacy, that is already like a small declaration of war. Because most likely they won't give you a hug, right? Um, or who knows? But most people, if they do, they're not doing that to necessarily give you a hug. Most likely they're gonna do that to simply piss you off. So, good vibes only is kind of a drug because it can become addictive. And good vibes only feels and smells so much like people pleasers because they want to appear very positive by smiling all the time and hiding their pains. But never forget that the people who smile the most aren't necessarily the happiest. You'll get over it is a sign of toxic positivity again because you'll get over it is a quote that many people say. Now, this may itself not be proof enough, but when you tell yourself you'll get over it, you're kind of denying a bit of the reality. Because there will always be challenges that are beyond you. And, well, you yourself may not get over it, but some other people can help, right? That is why you'll get over it is very toxic because it smells a lot of separation. There are a lot of people who are set up so violently on their own ideals, on their own things, but the problem is they want to do it alone. I myself am also guilty of this, but I'm sure, well, not other people are. But at least I know I have my own ways which are not compatible to a lot of people. Obviously, don't use this as a uh, discouragement, right, to socialize, or, well, actually from socializing, or as a means not to socialize. But in my case, I know I'm highly intricate and I'm not gonna easily be understood by other people. And usually that which I build is far more complex or far broader than, most people's comfort zone. So that is why I recur to doing things alone. But most people should not get stuck into this get over it. Because in many cases, you're not able to do a certain things not because you naturally wouldn't be capable, but because it is time for a break. That is why I use a principle in life which I call it, well, I usually don't give names to my principles because I don't function based on meanings and words and names. I'm more likely functioning beyond words themselves, but I would call it constructive parallelism, alright? Or parallel construction. Now, the way it works is, well, when you build a building, a big building, right, with a lot of stories, all each of those floors has to be built, right? You don't build a quarter of a building like, all the floors for a quarter of the building, then, another quarter, right? You build a few stories, then you get on with the other part, right? So you usually build the whole story, right? When you build a floor, you start from somewhere and you don't build other floors above those necessarily, or probably at most a few, right? And then you have to bring all the other aspects to the same level. This is how I learn things. Because in order to learn something, you need to create a strong foundation. Like the Romulans would say in Star Trek Armada 2, a video game which I really enjoyed in my childhood. A strong empire begins with a firm foundation. So the point is, always put the pieces together because that's what's most important for me. If I don't understand at least one of the pieces, the whole thing is kind of a failure for me. But once I understand all the pieces, I'm simply unstoppable. That is why I'll always take far more time than others to simply understand things, but I will simply and usually easily win time on the long run because I have sedimented certain things and they are part of my awareness and of my realization rather than just bare knowledge, which people simply put into their minds and use more or less without wanting. So getting over something is always a matter of time and also potential, because there will be moments, right? There are always cycles in life. There are cycles of highs and there are cycles of lows. There will be days in which your body simply cannot handle it, or simply your mind is way too karmic on, or let's call it, your mind simply wants to eliminate a lot of things. That is why there will be certain days in which you feel or you may feel that you cannot so called control your mind. Just leave it to do its own thing. You will see how free your mind is afterwards if you don't create even more karma by, you know, opposing anything that happens. Other people have it a lot worse. Well, if you compare, if you use this, the point is you are kind of denying half the reality. Because there will always be people who are worse than your situation, but there will always be people who are better than your situation. You should always focus on the people who are better, because this is the principle of life. If you take into account life as it is, life will always be like this. You are here, you want to be there, right? You earn, let's say, $10,000 per month, you want 20,000, right? It is always a tendency towards the better. Now, you can do this by simply falling into your impulses and most likely to the so-called ego and impulsively seek that objective, or you can do it with awareness and conscientiousness, right? And be conscious of each of your steps and take the right decisions instead of just acting impulsively and, well, at times simply missing opportunities because you were too focused on other things. Remember that when people act impulsively, the problem is they focus on the impulse instead of focusing on the objective, right? Because the impulse is an escape mechanism from something. You are doing that to distract yourself from a certain pain. So your main priority is to focus on running away from the pain. That is what your impulse is saying. Your impulse doesn't care about your objective. Your objective simply happens to allow a distraction from the pain, right? So all these subterfuges have to be understood by people. Focusing on people who have worse, right, situations. You're focusing on people who are suffering, right? You're focusing on people who are still struggling. Instead of focusing on people who are great. You want to become a public speaker. Focus on the best public speakers in the world. Now, they may not use their voice, to the best of humanity, but ultimately learning some of their skills, some of their abilities, seeing how they cope with situations, right? Sharing some of their wisdom from afar or simply attending their meetings is one way to go. I would rather be the best of everyone around, right? This is something that I've functioned by for a long while. But the point is, I've discovered that usually having been the one who is more or less the most adaptable or the best at a certain specific or the wiser among people is not necessarily the best thing. For example, when I was in school, I was among the best when it came to English because I had an English teacher as a mother. But the point is, well, I still have because she didn't pass away, but the point is, when I moved to other classes, the teachers would simply more or less disregard me because obviously you have to tend to those who are still, struggling, and, you who are better, well, you'll kind of be left behind. So if you don't practice your own talents on your own, well, you might actually have them dulled down, right? So it is better to be the most stupid one in the class in a way or in a group of people because there is like everything to learn. There is so much to learn, right? From everyone around. Now, obviously, it also matters that those people are, like-minded and they're not negativistic fuckers. Smile, crying won't help. Well, the more you smile, the point is, smiling is, just like laughter, one of the best natural medicine. And I can actually tell you from my own existence. But just smiling, while inside of you are crumbling, that is not good. Because even if you're smiling, you're technically a liar. And you're sending lies and liar vibrations to everyone around. And you're gonna attract similar people. And you don't want that because you're gonna attract their misery as well into your life. Crying is one of the most powerful things because it allows you to simply eliminate negativity and toxicity from within you. It is the same as with sweating. It is the same as with, taking a dump or taking a pee. Because everything that is put out of your body simply puts it out because it no longer needs it, right? Those are toxins. Now, your tears may not necessarily be physical toxins, but they are loaded most likely with negativity and things that you don't need. Your physical body was built to simply dismiss that which no longer needs in so many ways. And this wasn't done for, particularly no reason. But in order to rule people, you need to turn them against them. That is why you have so many people calling you all sorts of things, like crying won't help, for example. Right? Nowadays, crying is considered almost a crime. It's very bad. People will laugh at you. Who cares? Crying is a sign of strength, because through that, you show that it is simply the best to show your signs of weakness, in a way. Because let other people laugh. I always tell other people, let other people laugh of you. Okay? Ask yourself for once, can you actually laugh naturally? Can you actually say jokes with people and laugh at other people's jokes, or even at yours? Can you laugh naturally? Well, if so, why would you bother if other people laugh at you? Look at their faces, see how they're miserable many people are. Because most of those people are entirely miserable. They only need external sources. Well, obviously we all need external sources to laugh at. But the point is, you can goof around and laugh at your own goofing. That is also as powerful a medicine as usual. Because it is part of discovering how powerful being alone can be. Not necessarily lonely, but spending alone time is also good. Introspection is very powerful. So, smiling is very good if it is done genuinely, naturally. If people laugh at you because you are who you are, let them do whatever they want. They are authentic in their own pains, because that is the most they know. If they knew better, they knew better, right? So also think about this quote, this question that suddenly popped up in my mind one day when some people, were laughing at me. I don't remember what for, but the quote simply went like this. It was more or less like a short story, but the quote went on like this. Think about people and how miserable they are. Most people haven't laughed most likely in years. And I mean genuine laughter, not, that they are laughing just to please other people. So the point is, when you made some people finally genuinely laugh, think of that as a kind of a glory. Think of it as you being a clown. And I know I've been a clown ever since I was young, because I always was interested in making other people laugh. Because through laughter, I pull people together. Keeping people together is a sign of strength, because you're not interested in separating them. You're interested in grouping them and having them learn that their differences can be strengths in a collective. Because if everyone was like a certain individual, like for example authoritarian regimes promote, if everyone was like that individual, the whole group would die because they all have the same weaknesses, right? And if those weaknesses are so strong, right, they will all perish. Many people told me, what if the world was like you? Well, I actually told people from quite a lot of years back in my history that, I would rather the world be as is and tend towards, well, more well-being and more introspection instead of everyone being like me. Because, well, I am a human, right? I have my own weaknesses. If everyone was like me, they would also have the same weaknesses. So diversity would be nullified, and anyone would be simply vulnerable even more to the same weaknesses, right? Just stay positive is another toxic thing you can say yourself, because when you have to feel bad, just allow it to go. Because in order to eliminate negative emotions from you, you have to let them flow. You have to feel through them, and at the same time even become introspective. Ask yourself questions. Why are you feeling like that? Why are you thinking bad thoughts? Why are you thinking bad vibes about certain people? Obviously there were all moments back in time when you simply accepted certain things, but obviously in the present moment, why is it that you're still lingering on those? Why is it that those are still lingering in your mind, in your emotions, right? Because you have been inflicted with those in a certain moment back in your time or in previous lifetimes. So introspection will always allow you to think for yourself. This is apparently a sin nowadays because, well, if you want to rule people, anyone who simply thinks for themselves has to be ruled out. So, you know, if you look at the picture here on the screen, you can see that each of these things that I described, right, the ones on the left under toxic positivity, also has a genuine optimism, representative. So all this being said, hopefully this video was introspective enough. You are appreciated. Take care of yourselves. Ferenc Board signing out.